Hey, everybody, this is Brother Nero, and I'm here with Juliet Blair. And this is our first kind of virtual meetup kind of outreach that we're going to answer questions for people. This is basically going to be a beginner's guide to shadow path diabolism, and we're going to answer some of the most frequently asked questions. Remember, this is a very basic beginner FAQ sort of thing. And then at the end of it, we're going to respond to comments or questions if there are any. So if you have any comments or questions, please go ahead and start posting them now, and we will answer them towards the end of the presentation. Hi, Julia. How are you doing today?
I'm doing okay, thank you. How about yourself?
Oh, I'm doing good. So let's get right into it, shall we? Let's start with the first question. Can you put it up on the screen, Julia?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, what is diabolism? I'll take that one. Well, diabolism is generally the religious worship of Satan or demons, and it refers to somebody who actually worships them in a religious sense and works with them in a magical sense. That's what diabolism is, and it's the actual date of the word, according to Merriam-Webster, is I think 1512, 1514, or was it? No, it wasn't. What is it? You know, Julia?
I don't know off the top of my head. No, sorry.
It was, I think it was 1614. We'll check it and then get back to you. But anyway, um, but that's what it meant. And so uh, that's basically what it means in a general sense. And it's very important to point out this right here. Diabolism doesn't mean any specific set of practices. It just means the religious worship of the devil or demons. And it also means working with the devil and demons. It doesn't mean any particular practice, any particular tradition. That's the most important thing to note about the term diabolism. And if anybody tells you that diabolism means any specific tradition, it doesn't. It just means the general worship of Satan. So I want to be clear about that. Okay, next question. You want to take it, Julia?
Absolutely. So the next question we have on the list is, what is shadow path diabolism? And this is the specific tradition that we practice within Devil's Mark Ministries. This is the tradition that Brother Nero established. And what it is it's a form of devil worship, diabolism, that takes a less of the approach that a lot of modern Satanism takes, and takes things more to almost a pagan approach, like a medieval devil worship, traditional witchcraft approach, and focuses on serious worship rather than fooling around with symbols or aesthetic. We celebrate the natural world. We honor the gods by celebrating the worldly. We believe in living with discipline and personal integrity. That's hence the slogan: discipline, devotion, and self-mastery. And basically, each person within Shadow Path Diabolism is encouraged to create and live by their own moral codes, and not be overly concerned by social norms as long as they're not harming anyone else. We believe that individuals choose to live ultimately as they should choose to live as they are, as long as they're honoring the gods and not harming anyone, and they're not infringing upon the free will and rights of others. And like most satanic groups, you find also free will is the paramount ideal that we live up to. But there's also those individual ideals that I've just mentioned.
Yeah, I think it's important to mention that we really do have a kind of non-interference policy in a lot of ways. The only time that we kind of break that rule of the non-interference policy, we kind of believe that people should be allowed to live how they want to, and it's not our business how to tell people how to practice or how to worship Satan or what their religion should be. The only time we have make an exception to that is when somebody's actually manipulating our fellow Satanists. We feel as priesthood, as a ministry, we have an obligation to try to protect those who worship Satan. So if we feel like somebody's trying to take advantage of somebody and deliberately trying to harm somebody, then we'll step in and might make a comment if we think somebody in the community is doing harm. But generally speaking, we don't go out of our way to criticize other people's belief systems, and we don't criticize them for what they believe. If we criticize them for anything, it's what they do. And one of our biggest rules is that we try to encourage our members not to engage in, like, internet um, arguments and flaming and all that sort of stuff. And we tell people, you know, don't go to somebody else's YouTube channel or Facebook and cause problems and make nasty comments, because that's kind of like going to somebody's house and shitting in their yard. You know what I mean? It's like there's no there's no reason for that. That's their YouTube channel. That's their Facebook page. That's their website. Leave people be. Give them the respect to be able to express themselves however they see fit in their own space. Now, if they come to your space, to your website or whatever, then you have every right to respond to that. But generally, as Shadow Path Diabolists, we try to respect the rights of other people to believe differently than we do. And the only time we make a comment is when we think they're doing harm to someone else who's innocent, or someone who is, can't protect themselves, kind of thing, in Satanism. So, but that's our non-interference rule. And shadow path diabolism, generally speaking, is a combination of witchcraft, traditional witchcraft, ancient paganism, and medieval devil worship. It's a combination of those elements. And magic is not a priority in this ministry. Like, magic is just something we do to enhance our practice, to enhance our devotion to the demons. It's not the focus of our tradition. So we might do a ceremonial ritual, say, but it's not the purpose of our tradition. It's not what we're about. It's just something we use as a tool. Whereas you'll have magical organizations that focus on the magic and the self development through the use of ceremonial magic is their main focus. That is not the way we do things. To us, magic is a tool to be used to aid us in communication, to aid us in connection, maybe to aid us in our own personal development, but it's not the intention. And that's one of the biggest differences between shadow path diabolism and other traditions. We're mainly focused on the religious worship of Satan and the demonic gods. Okay, Julia, what's the next question?
So the next question is, who are the demonic gods? Would you like to take this one?
Yes. So the demonic gods to us are all of the demons that are in Satan's pantheon. We believe they're gods in their own right, and they deserve worship in their own right, and we give them rituals and respect as separate individuals. Now, we believe they serve Satan in his hierarchy of their own free will, and they respect Satan, and he's their, as we refer to it, his king. He's their king and emperor by choice, by election. But um, but they should be worshipped and honored as gods in their own right, and we try to do that for them, and our rituals reflect that. And just for people that are just showing up now, I just want to let you know that if you have any questions or comments that you want us to answer, we'll be doing a FAQ kind of question and answer segment at the end of our presentation. And feel free to go ahead and start leaving your comments now, and we'll put them up and answer them individually in just a few minutes. But that's basically it. We basically treat them as gods in their own right, and we have rituals dedicated to individual demons. And for me particularly, I my patron demon, other than my main focus of worship being Satan and Lucifer, is Abaddon. That's a very important demon to me, and so I have a personal set of practices that I do in honor and remembrance of him. Um, and each individual diabolist may have certain demons as they work with. And people will often ask us, by the way, they'll say, what demons do I need to work with? What I tell people is you work with the demons that you're drawn to. For most people, that's like, say, maybe 6 to 8 demons that they feel drawn to, and that's their main focus. And that's all right if you only feel drawn to a few, and work with them, work with the ones you feel drawn to. And as time goes on, you might develop more of a relationship with other spirits, with others of the demonic gods. But don't feel like you have to just because someone else tells you to work with a certain entity. Work with the entities that you feel drawn to, that you feel are calling to you, and give them the offerings that you feel are appropriate, that you feel they're leading you to offer. But um, don't feel obligated to work with a specific hierarchy just because someone in some book tells you to. That's very important to work with what you feel comfortable with, and to build that personal relationship. That's the key thing, folks. Build the personal relationship. Okay. Julia, you got another question for me?
Absolutely. Well, I was going to say I'm happy to take this next one if you'd like.
Okay.
Do you worship evil? Which is
Okay, you can go ahead and take that one.
a very common question that you'll encounter if you're any flavor of Satanist or Diabolist. And the thing is, we don't consider Satan or demonic spirits to be inherently evil. I mean, there is a dark side to these spirits, certainly, which you'll encounter in my experience, and I think in Nero's experience, he can speak more confidently on it than me. But not necessarily. They're not single-faceted beings, from what I have come to understand. And we consider Satanism to be primarily a god of the physical world and of free will. And you don't to not be a champion of spiritual purity, but of living in the natural world and obeying the laws of the natural world as they are, instead of living to kind of overcome them. So in some aspects of, it's in some aspects of nature, there's a light side and a dark side, and we believe that there is that, but we don't see them as the evil, like sort of
Entities of Christianity.
yeah. So not the entities of hellfire and punishment and eternal torture. Absolutely. And we don't necessarily believe they abide by human rules of morality. Humans have a social contract within, that allows us to live with each other, that the demons might not necessarily obey, because they probably don't have a society that mirrors ours. But we also believe they have a positive side to them as well. And in our method of practice and how we believe that you should practice is that we don't discourage kindness, and we definitely don't discourage living destructively. We believe that you should live in a life-affirming way, and in a way that doesn't infringe upon the free will of others.
I'll kind of expand upon that. We see the demons as amoral. That's been my experience personally, and a lot of people's experiences. And in fact, it's the voodoo gods are described that way by many voodoo practitioners. They're not immoral, they're just amoral. They don't really have a set of morals. They don't look at the world the way that humans do, because they're not bound by time and space. They're not bound by human culture. They're not bound by our modern sensibilities. So, um, you know, when they want an offering, it's not a matter of evil. I mean, to them, like people nowadays, if you were to say, I'm going to do an animal sacrifice, everybody would clutch their pearls and be like, oh my God, it's terrible. But you got to remember, these are ancient spirits. And in the past, that's how they were honored, by blood sacrifice. And so to them, it's not a matter of being evil. It's just the way it is, right? So they don't have the same moral codes that we do. So what we try to do is we try to understand that, and we try to honor them in ways that is practical for us to do. And we will explain to them, we're sorry that, you know, we don't offer you these sorts of things, but it's not the way we do things now. And most of the time the spirits will be respectful, but you will find spirits that are kind of demanding. So you have to be diplomatic when dealing with spirits, and you'll get communications, and you have to make choices. Like I say in my original book, I say, in some places, um, it's legal to make certain offerings, and other places it's not legal. And you have to be responsible for your own choices. You have to do what feels right to you in your practice. If you feel uncomfortable with something, or you, like, say, for example, you don't feel like offering your own blood is appropriate, that's a choice you have to make. But you shouldn't put your morality on other people. You should let them practice how they will. And if they do something that gets them in trouble with the law, that's their problem. It's not yours. And in Shadow Path Diabolism, this is one of the most important aspects of all of this. We believe that each individual practitioner must take responsibility for themselves. They must be responsible for their actions, and they should never blame it on the demonic gods, and they should never blame it on other people. If you make a choice to do something and that gets you in trouble with the authorities, that's on you, bro. That's on you. It's not Satan's fault. It's not the demon's fault. It's you, because you have free will. Satan gave you a free will. And sometimes I think they test people to see how stupid they are, to see if they're stupid enough to do things that they know are not in their best interest. I really do. Because I think the demons are actually waiting for people to go, hang on, uh, if I do this, this isn't going to be beneficial to my religion. It's not going to be beneficial to me. And it's certainly not going to serve you in the end. So maybe I should question whether I should be doing this. And they wait and see if people are foolish enough to do stuff. Because if you're not smart enough to figure out that in the end, a certain action is going to hurt you and harm Satanism, then you're not worthy to be priesthood in the first place. That's the honest truth. Or you're not worthy to be a servant of Satan in the first place. So, I think they do some of that. I think they kind of punk people sometimes, but that's just my opinion on that. But anyway, the point being is that they're amoral entities. They're neither immoral or moral. They're just kind of indifferent towards human morality. I think that's very important for people to understand when they work with them. Don't expect the demons to have your standard of morals. They're ancient spirits. Things were done very differently in ancient times, and they were done differently than they're done now. Don't expect the demons to have your moral code. Okay. And if they do have your moral code, if they do always agree with you, and the things they ask you are always stuff that you're in agreement with or fit your political agenda or whatever it is, you have to ask yourself a question whether you're dealing with real spirits or not. Because if you're dealing with individual entities, they're not always going to agree with you. And if they do, you're deluding yourself. You're probably not in contact with anything real. Because I tell you this much, demonic spirits don't always agree with the person that's practicing or the person that's doing the rituals. And if they do, there's something fishy going on. Same thing with if you're getting a message, if you've got somebody who claims they have contact with spirits and the messages they get are always benefiting that person or always benefiting the cult leader, then you know something's up, because demons don't do anything just to benefit one person all the time. They're going to follow their own agenda. They're going to do what they think is right, and they really don't care what a bunch of humans think about it. If they want to do something, they're going to do it. So if you have demons communicating messages that seems to only benefit the leader, watch out. There's something fishy going on. All right. Next question, Julia.
So the next question that we have on docket is, what are your policies regarding children within the religion and within, indoctrinating them into the, well, indoctrinating maybe isn't the word, but teaching them about the religion, raising them in the religion, baptizing them, and so on and so forth. I don't know if that's something you would like to cover.
Yeah, I'll do it. Well, the first thing is, we believe that Satan does not accept somebody that has been coerced. We believe that you have to come to him by free will. You have to be called. You have to be drawn to him. And he will not accept somebody that's been manipulated into worshiping him. He will not accept somebody that's been conditioned into worshiping him. So, with that in mind, we tell parents, like we've had people come to us and say, will you baptize my son or daughter or my infant into Satanism? I said, no, we'll do a blessing for them, but we're not going to baptize them, because you have to be old enough to be able to make the choice yourself. And if the child is not old enough, mature enough to make a choice to serve Satan themselves, then we can't do that. But we can do a satanic blessing on them, and ask Satan to protect them and watch over them, but we can't dedicate them to Satan. And so basically the general rule is, until your child is able to make a choice for themselves, they should not be there should not be any baptism or anything performed on them. You can ask for blessings, but baptisms would be it just would be bad form. In our experience, in my experience personally, and the experience of other groups that I've worked with, Satan will not accept somebody that does not have the ability to make the choice for themselves to serve him. That's the main thing. But the other thing I want to point out about parents and children is that a lot of times children will see their parents practicing rituals if they grew up around it, and they'll want to participate with the adults. They'll want to fit in. So they'll pretend to have an interest in Satanism that's not really a genuine interest in Satanism. They just want to be like mom and dad. So that's another thing you need to look out for. If your kids start expressing an interest in diabolism or Satanism or witchcraft or any of those things, you have to ask yourself, do they really have a genuine interest in it, or are they just trying to be like the adults and trying to fit in and trying to get attention? Because you don't want them to do things because they're trying to fit in. If your kids have to try to fit into your rituals to get your attention, then that's something, you're doing something wrong as a parent. You should give them enough attention that they don't feel the need to have to do satanic rituals to feel wanted or accepted. Your children should not think that the only value they have is when they're doing something that you want them to do religiously, right? I mean, Satanism is all about free will. So, you have to be aware of that as a satanic parent. It's a very important thing to make sure that if your children do express interest in Satanism, it's from a genuine place and not just because they feel that's what you expect of them. But so that's the thoughts on that. And again, just for anybody who's joining right now, if you have any questions, please feel free to post them and we will be answering them at the end of the presentation. So we'll get to that and we'll answer your questions for you. And we'll be doing this presentation, this beginner presentation of what is Shadow Path Diabolism every 2 weeks at the same time on the same day. So if your questions don't get answered or you think of something later, you can always come back 2 weeks from today at 4:30 p.m. Central, and we'll answer them for you then. We'll be doing the basic presentation the same way we're doing it now, and then we'll save the end for questions that people might have. So if you have something that comes up or you think about later, please come back 2 weeks from today, and we'll be happy to answer it for you. Anyway, Julia, next question.
Yes. So the next one that we have on the list is isn't this Satanism, diabolism just reverse Christianity? And I am happy to go into that one at least a little bit first. And the simple answer is no, most of the time. A lot of people do practice something that you could call reverse Christianity. For Shadow Path Diabolism, it's absolutely not. And I think we can only really speak for ourselves here. But the way we practice, we don't consider our religion to sort of be a corollary to Christianity. And it's a religion of its own right. And we tend to believe that Satan, the demonic gods, are separate entities from Christianity that existed before the birth of Christianity, who have been given Christian sort of identities because they embody the principles that Christianity goes against. And we sometimes, we don't necessarily engage in blasphemy as a rule. We recognize that it definitely has a place. We don't tend to use symbols such as the inverted cross. We don't tend to make, for instance, Bible burning a huge portion of our rituals or whatever. However, we do recognize those things have their place. For instance, if you are coming into Satanism or diabolism from a background of Christianity and you feel that you need to cleanse yourself of, maybe you've been baptized into Christianity and you want to get rid of that energy, or you just feel the need to cut off your past in a very clean and decisive way so that you can dedicate yourself to your devotion to Satan and the demonic gods, that's when you would use something like a black mass or a Bible burning or whatever you need to do to denounce the way that you were brought up, the things from your past that might hold you back. But we don't necessarily think that we're not necessarily here to just rebel against Christianity. We recognize that the importance of adversarial spirit, but we don't accept the Christian ideals of sin. We don't consider human nature to be impure or broken in any way. We don't really, well, for myself, I don't really believe in the concepts of salvation and damnation. That's down to the individual personally. But in our particular practice, they don't really have a huge amount of meaning. And so basically, the simple answer in Shadow Path Diabolism is not reverse Christianity in any way, shape, or form. We are separate from it. We don't go in for the whole, let's burn down a church nonsense, because that's nothing to do with your individual worship. That's making a statement against an existing group.
The other thing I would add too is that the reason we don't consider it reverse Christianity, I'm sure the Church of Satan would say that it is reverse Christianity, but we don't. We're not sitting out here trying to rebel against Christianity. We think of Shadow Path Diabolism as its own religion with its own traditions, and we don't focus on um, hating the Christian God or necessarily doing rituals to blaspheme the Christian God. We don't really give the Christian God much thought, generally speaking. We just focus on worshiping our God and focusing on living our life based on what we believe satanic principles are. We have our own holidays, our own observances, and I always tell people that you really need to focus on making Satanism, your form of diabolism, or whatever religious form of Satanism you believe in, its own tradition that stands on its own, separate and distinct from Christianity. If the only thing you do in your satanic rituals is blaspheme Christianity, then you are a reverse Christian. That's what you are. You're not a diabolist. You're not a Satanist. You're a reverse Christian, because a Satanist would have a religious devotion that is separate from Christianity. Even if you believe that Satan is the Christian devil, and you believe that he's a fallen angel or the Nephilim or the Watchers or whatever it is you believe, you still should have a separate and distinct practice from Christianity. You should have a devotion and a connection with Satan that goes beyond that. If your only connection is rebelling against Christianity, that's a problem with your religion. That's a problem with your approach. I think that's just my opinion. Now, some people would argue with that, and I understand that. And I'm not saying that if you do that you're wrong, that you don't have every right to practice any way you want to. I mean, I believe that Satan gave us free will. I believe the reason that we have the sciences and technologies we do today is because Satan and the demonic gods gave us that spark of creativity. He gave humanity the power of evolution and the ability to change and grow. I believe it was him that gave us that ability. So I'm not saying that you can't practice however you want. I'm just saying if your devotion to Satan doesn't grow beyond that, then there's a problem, I think, with your spiritual development, and you need to take a look at yourself. But again, somebody like the Church of Satan would say that we're reverse Christians no matter what we do. So there you go. Next question.
Yes, it's really down to the individual. I'd just also like to say before I jump into the next question, those of you who have posted questions in the comments, thank you for posting those. We will address the questions that you guys have given us in the comments at the end of the list that we've got here, which we should be finishing up fairly soon here. The next question that we have on for our personal FAQ is Shadow Path Diabolism a form of paganism? And Brother Nero will probably be able to give you a more definitive answer on this than I will. But I would also like to say that the question of whether diabolism, theistic Satanism in general, can be considered paganism is a bit contentious, doesn't necessarily have a simple answer, and it really depends on how you define paganism. For myself, I would say that paganism is any kind of polytheistic, earth-based or worldly-based religion that embraces concepts such as witchcraft and pre-Christian religious practices and things like that, and may or may not incorporate them into someone's original practice. So by that definition, I would say that labeling some satanic religious traditions as paganism is apt, but it really does come down to the individual and how they practice. And I don't know how Brother Nero would feel about that sort of question for Shadow Path Diabolism.
Yeah, it is a form of paganism because it's a polytheistic religion, and for me personally, I think it's very important to point out here that each individual diabolist, each person that practices shadow path diabolism, has a slightly different view of Satan, and we don't have like one way of looking at him. Each person has their, we give people the freedom to kind of believe in him the way they want to. Like for Julia, she said that for her, she doesn't associate Satan with the Christian devil or anything like that. Well, for me, I'm exactly the opposite. I don't care whether you see him as the Christian devil, whether you see him as the fallen angel, a watcher, the Nephilim. I don't care if you believe in all of that stuff or don't believe in any of it, and you just see him as Carnunus or Pan. To me, those are all labels for my God, the entity that I know as Satan. And I don't care whether he's the Christian version of that devil or the non-Christian version of that devil. To me, he's my God. I made an eternal pact to serve him, and I'm going to serve him till the end. And it doesn't matter who or what he is. He's my God, and I'm devoted to him till the end. And this ministry was based on that idea that I made a promise to him to serve him, and I will do that until the day I die. And I'm trying to make sure that this ministry survives after I'm gone. So there will be at least one place where it is actually about the worship of Satan instead of about ego or about, you know, or trying to just manipulate people for our own benefit. The whole point of this ministry is to give people a place where people who really worship Satan have a place to come and associate with people who believe in him and worship him and honor him and love him and respect the demons and want to devote their life to him. That's what we're all about. And whether we believe slightly differently than each other, it doesn't matter. The point is, we all believe Satan is our God. Isn't that the most important thing? That's what I believe. And I'm hoping that other people will get to know us and come to our outreaches and events and say, you know what? These guys mean what they say. They live this shit. And unfortunately for us, we don't get that much exposure. So people don't know about us. And a lot of people haven't really availed themselves of the opportunity to come to our events and get to know us. So they really don't know what we're about and how serious we are about this. And I have a feeling that the more people that get to know how devoted we are to the devil, how serious we are about our practices, we're going to start gaining ground and people are going to start talking more about us. But I think the reason they haven't is because most people are unaware of us. We don't get a lot of media attention, we don't get exposure, and that's just the way it is. But once they get to know what we're all about and what our objectives are and how serious we are, I think that's going to change rapidly. Anyway, okay, what's the next question, Julia?
So next thing that we have on the list is one of my favorite ones. Aren't satanic religions just cults? And this is one, if you don't mind me getting on a soapbox here for a minute, I feel very strongly about this one. In my humble opinion, the term satanic cult is an oxymoron, because the way cults function is it's a leader or an organization which imposes this very strong, very rigid control over its members. And you see cults, you'll see cults do things like they'll limit who you can associate with. They'll try and cut you off from your loved ones. They'll make it so that you absolutely have to be this certain way. Basically, the leader's philosophy is the right way and the only right way to live, to believe. And if you don't believe that way, then you'll never achieve enlightenment, true happiness, whatever the benefit is that the cult is peddling. And so basically you have to bend and mold yourself to conform to the will of the cult leader or the cult in general, or else you face excommunication or worse. And if you try to leave, sometimes you'll be putting yourself and possibly your loved ones at risk. And all of that is completely opposite to what I see, and I think a lot of my peers see, as satanic principles, because that just goes against everything about free will. That's the kind of thing that you hear the story of the adversary being against oppression, against someone saying, I am in charge and you must obey regardless of whether or not you agree with me. And so I don't think that any organization that could be called a cult is truly satanic in nature. That is just my opinion, but what do you think about it, Nero?
Well, no, I think any organization that tries to tell you listen to the leader and don't question anything and tries to take away your free will and doesn't allow you to express yourself is unsatanic no matter what it is. Because to me, Satan gave us free will. As I said before, I believe Satan literally gave us the spark of creation, whether you want to use the symbol of the black flame or the eternal fire, which is fire or which is blood, whatever, seed of the serpent, whatever symbol you use, I believe Satan gave us free will and self-awareness. So any human being or any organization that tries to take that from you and makes you try to conform is unsatanic. And that's one of the reasons why it's very disturbing to me when I see groups that call themselves satanic starting to act like cults and start to say, you need to worship us and you need to be a part of our organization. We're a part of the Illuminati. We're a part of this. And if you don't do what we say you should do and you don't practice the way we say you should, you're not a Satanist and we're going to excommunicate you and shit like that. That's not satanic. Satanic organizations don't do shit like that. That's cult like. That's Christian like. And they should be ashamed of themselves. And everybody in the satanic community should call those people out and say, get the fuck out of here. You fraud, you fake, you idiot. We left Christianity because we didn't want people to have to do that. Get out of here, you morons. You know, but unfortunately, the satanic community doesn't do that enough. We don't stand up against that shit. And that's why it's becoming more prevalent, you know, with people kind of following these charismatic leaders that tell them, oh, follow me and I'll give you the secrets to all occult knowledge and I'll give you the secret to this and I'll tell you how to invoke Belial for, you know, $500 a seminar or whatever. That all that fake ass shit. If the satanic community would say, we're not putting up with this shit, we're going to cancel anybody who does that, they would stop doing it. But because the satanic community tolerates this cult-like behavior, that's why Satanism is becoming more cult-like. But again, just to wrap up my statement, so I don't ramble here, any organization that tries to coerce you into doing things against your will or doing things that you don't want to do is unsatanic, because Satan gave you that free will and only Satan has the right to take it away as far as I'm concerned. So I think that's the most important thing to remember. If somebody tells you that you're not satanic because you want to do something, it's not you that's unsatanic, it's them that's unsatanic. Okay. So next question, Julia.
Yes, I'd also just like to say, because I think it's important, if you are in some sort of a situation and you feel that your leader or people around you are leading you into something that you feel is harmful for yourself, or that, you know, is not where you want to go, get out of that situation immediately. They are not your gods. They are your spiritual leaders. And if they are misleading you, it should not impact your relationship with the gods. Your relationship with the gods is sacred and cannot be metered by another person, in my humble opinion. The next question that we are getting into, I think, is one that you should take, Nero. You have very strong feelings about this, which is what are your opinions about demonology? You get asked that one quite a bit, I think, which is why I've included it.
Yeah. My general opinions of demonology as a religion is that I've met people and I've seen videos by people on YouTube that practice demonology, and their respect for the demons seems to be very genuine, and they seem to be very sincere about their practices. My opinions of S. Conley as an author or some of her work is, I have questions about some of her work and some of her ideas. But as far as the demonology as a religion, everybody that I've ever spoken to, every video that I've ever seen, everybody I've ever met in demonology seems to be very genuine, very devoted to the demons. So I have no problem with demonology as a practice, but I have some questions about S. Conley herself and her theories and her tradition. But other than that, that's all I really have to say about that.
Yeah, and for the record, I started out my path with demonology because it was just sort of, I was just sort of flying by the seat of my pants, and that was sort of what I encountered, and it was the most, I encountered the grifters and the scam artists first, and the people who are like, if you pay me $500, I can help you make a pact with Lucifuge or whoever. But then I stumbled into demonology, and it was the first kind of encounter I had with a really serious religion-oriented form of worshiping the demonic gods. I've since moved on from that. There were a few things about it, and about like the way that the lore, I suppose you could call it, the practice itself, the tradition itself. There were some things that I had my questions about, but if that is your framework, if that works for you, if that's the way you approach it, again, always think critically, always question, always take things with a grain of salt, but there's not necessarily anything super wrong with it.
Yeah. Go ahead.
So I was going to say, would you like to move on to the final point before we start taking questions from our viewers?
Yes.
So just really quick to wrap things up. If you don't know what's the ultimate goal of Devil's Mark Ministries, where can you go to learn more? Basically, in simple terms, our main goals are education and providing resources to not just Shadow Path Diabolists, but anyone who might need them. If you practice diabolism or theistic Satanism or anything related, and you feel that you have no place to go, that it can feel like everywhere you turn, there's infighting and grifters and people who would do you harm. And it's really difficult to find community or people who are just out here providing religious resources and ritual and practice for just the general public, really. And so that's kind of what we want to do with our organization. We're not out here to convert people. We're not out here to control your beliefs. If you agree with us, you agree with us, and if you don't, that's perfectly fine. We want to provide community and support, and we kind of just want to give structure to our practices and kind of get like-minded individuals to connect with each other and practice together. You don't need to be a Shadow Path Diabolist to engage with the ministry or benefit from our work, and anyone who does follow the tradition basically does so of their own free will. We're just here to provide guidance and encourage worship in a constructive and mindful way and provide a safe space to do so. And if you would like to know more about us, you can visit us on our website, which I'll put up now, or you can subscribe to us on our Substack for the Shadow Path Journal, which is our magazine that we put out quarterly. And we'll put out announcements and articles on Substack as well for people to look at. And you're always welcome to write to us.
Yeah, and we should say that we're having our next outreach on April 30th in Birmingham, England, in the UK. So if you
Yes.
happen to be in that area when you're watching this on April 30th, you can come visit with Julia and Brother Mo, and they'll be out there to meet with people that might be interested in learning more about Shadow Path Diabolism. And like I said earlier, I think once people get to know us and they really know that we're genuine about it and we're serious about it, I think our membership is going to increase dramatically, because I think there are so few people out there who actually worship Satan and who are serious about it, that I think once people encounter people, that's what the motive is. Our motive is to encourage the worship of Satan, to encourage the worship of demons, and that's our goal, and to give accurate information about the history of Satanism. And one of the things I want to point out as the founder of this organization, well, I've got people here, is that I don't ever, or I try not to, talk in absolute terms. Like, I will never say all Satanists believe this, all Diabolists believe this. I always try to distinguish between my personal opinions and what Satanists generally believe. And I always either say this is something we practice in Shadow Path Diabolism, or I'll say in my opinion. And I try to encourage everybody that volunteers for the ministry to make sure they distinguish between their personal practices and what Satanists generally believe. Because I find that a lot of satanic authors will say stuff like, all Luciferians believe this, all Satanists believe this, all these people believe this. And they'll speak in absolute terms like they speak for everyone. And we all know that's not true. So So rather than do that, I try to be as honest as I can and always tell you when I'm giving you my personal opinion as opposed to a general statement of fact. And that's one of the reasons we founded the ministry, is because we wanted to make sure to have information that distinguished what was factual or what you could prove and what was opinion. And when we do historical, when we have historical quotes in our information, we try to use anthropology and actual sourced material. We don't just say things because we want to say them. We try to find sources for anything that we say that's historical. So that's very important to us. And if we make a mistake, we want people to point it out to us and we want to correct it. But what we tell people is, if you're going to question us or you're going to give us information that says we're wrong about something, back it up with the source material so that we can give it to our members and to our readers and to people that come visit us, so we can correct our mistakes. Because we don't want to give inaccurate information. We want to be a source of reliable information for anybody and everybody. Okay? So I just wanted to point that out. Go ahead. What's the next thing?
Well, that concludes what we had pre-arranged. I was just going to take a look at the comments here. Hello, thank you everyone who's been writing into us. Thank you so much for participating. Thank you very much for the gentleman who said the Shadow Path Journal is quality. We really appreciate it. All of us work really hard on it. We had a question a little while back.
Go ahead and
Sorry?
put the comments on the feed, please.
Yes. So I'll put the questions up as I find them. So I have one here. So this one is about familiars and forming relationship with demonic familiars, and how common are familiars in diabolism. And this is something I have absolutely zero experience with, so I'm going to have to pass this one off to Brother Nero.
Well, familiars are something that is not very common in diabolism, simply because most people don't really work with familiars in Satanism anymore. Most people, that's kind of like an old witchcraft sort of way of looking at things. But we're starting to look into familiars and fetches, and I've personally been looking at different methods, and I haven't used any of these methods yet because I'm just now starting to use familiars and stuff in the traditional way. But generally speaking, most satanic organizations don't even believe in Satan or guardian spirits or fetches or anything like that. So it's rare that you're going to find a satanic group that even acknowledges this topic, because it's just not part of the practice. And because we believe in more traditional witchcraft, we're going to start bringing that into our practice, and more traditional rituals into our practice eventually, and have material on that. Because another thing that we try to do is, when we do work with magic, we're trying to take notes on it, and we're trying to keep records on it. And eventually, I'm hoping that we'll release some of the practices that we're working on and turn it into a book that people can use. But what we're trying to do is actually practice the rituals, and trying to test and experiment to see what kind of results we get, and then kind of report on those results as we get them. Eventually, that's what we're going to do, is release material on what we found works and what we found doesn't work. Gouache is another one of those things that most people talk about practicing but don't really practice. So what I'd like to do is eventually release a book based on actual experiments that we've done, and document the results that we got, and tell people what works and what doesn't. I mean, those are all things that I'd like to do before I leave this earth, and I hope I actually get around to doing that. But those are projects that I have in mind. And the fetch is a particular interest to me, because that's the way that people confirm their connection to Satan in the old days, according to the old myths. They believed that if you didn't have a fetch, you didn't have a true connection to Satan. And fetches were considered demons or imps that were given to people by Satan himself in the medieval witchcraft anyway. Now, of course, they have a different context within modern witchcraft, but within medieval devil worship, they were considered to be spirits, demons that were taking animal forms that would communicate with the witch and go off and do tasks for the witch. That was their original belief about them. Anyway, go ahead. Go ahead, Julia, with the next question.
Yeah, well, I would just want to say also there is a book that actually Nero recommended that I read, which I thought was quite interesting, called Consorting with Spirits, that dealt a lot with concepts such as familiars and fetch spirits and things like that, which was quite interesting. So I would recommend that as reading if that's a concept that you're interested in.
Yeah, that was
The
Jason Miller, right? Jason Miller
Jason,
was.
yes, that I couldn't remember the author's name, but yes, it was Jason Miller. It's a well written book. I recommend it, even just for even for interest's sake. Even if you read it and you don't necessarily find anything there to incorporate into your own practice, he has some interesting points of view.
Yeah,
So
it's definitely a book that will give you some practical thoughts about how to practice, how to experiment with familiar spirits and stuff. And it is written from a serious point of view. He's not one of these authors that's just kind of fucking around, you know. He does take it very seriously, and he does give you a lot of practical advice. So that is definitely a book worth checking out, even if it's just for the read, as Julia said.
absolutely. Okay, so the next questions we have on here are there any books or resources we can suggest for someone who's come in from an atheistic perspective? And I suppose, honestly, I don't know of anything specific. I mean, I tentatively suggest looking into some of the stuff that Michael Aquino's written, but he's not necessarily one of the heavy hitting figures in the really intense diabolism and theistic Satanism philosophy. But I think really it just depends on what you're looking for, and I think any of the books and resources that a newbie who's come straight into theistic Satanism might benefit from might also benefit you. As it's just, you kind of have to go into these things with an open mind. I personally was raised in an atheist family, and coming into Satanism as I did and diabolism as I did kind of required a paradigm shift, which I'm still working on several years down the line. It takes a lot to shake that sort of wall of non-belief that gets between you and your connection with the gods. But just keep an open mind and read as much as you can is all I would ever say to anyone. Read as much as you can and think critically about what you read. Nira, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think when you're coming at it from an atheistic point of view, the best thing to do is start getting into spiritual practice. I think you need to start with daily prayer. And even if you don't feel anything at first, one of the biggest things you have to deal with as an atheist is breaking down that wall of disbelief. You have to start opening yourself up. One of the things people don't realize when they're first getting into this, especially if they're coming from an atheistic point of view, is if you're convinced you know that the spirits don't exist, they're not going to go out of their way to prove themselves to you most of the time, unless they have a specific mission for you or some reason they want to communicate with you. They're under no obligation to communicate with you. And most of the time, what I find is that atheists think they're special. They think they're somebody. They think that the spirits are obligated to prove themselves to them. You're a human being. You're a person who hasn't existed on this planet very long at all, and you're talking to ancient spirits, and you're a mortal person talking to immortal entities, and you think you have the right to have an ego with them. And I'm telling you right now, if you think they're going to prove themselves to you because you're somebody, no spirit's going to do that. They don't have to. They don't need to prove themselves to you. They're ancient spirits, and to them, you're a human being. You're I guess you could say, the creation, questioning things. And I know that sounds very Christian, maybe, but I think atheists have this thing where they think, I'm somebody, I'm a living God, and somebody better answer me. And if somebody exists, they better prove themselves to me. Satan doesn't work like that, homie. Satan doesn't give a fuck about what you think. He doesn't give a fuck about whether you believe in him or not. He doesn't have to prove shit to you. And maybe from an atheist point of view, if you stop thinking about it like that and just open yourself up and let yourself experience that, then you'll have a more genuine experience. But it's going to take time, because you got to break down the walls, and open yourself up to let things happen. Because what I find with atheists is they're so convinced they know the answers they won't let anything happen. They won't allow themselves to even have an experience. So just don't rush yourself. It takes time, but start with basic prayer. Start with basic rituals, and and as far as what to read, I can't recommend anything because I don't read atheism books, and I don't read books on atheistic Satanism. So I can't tell you how to transition from a spiritual form of Satanism to a from an atheistic point of view, worldview, because I've never been an atheist. I've always believed that there's something beyond us. I've always had experiences that convinced me that there's something beyond us all my life since I was a child. So I don't have the experience of coming at it from that point of view. But I hope it helps. I mean, sorry if I seem a little dramatic, but I deal with a lot of atheists over the years, and I don't have a lot of sympathy for a lot of them because some of them are just rude and obnoxious. And then they wonder why the gods never prove themselves to them. It's because you're being a dick. That's why. And the gods don't have to prove themselves to you. All right. Anyway,
But
get,
one thing that I would add to that is even if you, because as I said, I kind of have an insider's perspective for this because I did come into it from well, I'd say an agnostic perspective in my case. But even if it's not ego that drives you to seek the proof or seek a physical manifestation, if you're raised in this climate of you can only believe what you see in front of your nose and nothing else exists if you don't have scientific proof for it. One, I'd say that scientific proof changes and develops as we learn more, so you can't necessarily put that as an absolute. But two, this sort of thing is a lot more difficult to wrap your head around than just, it's not something you can put under a microscope. It's not something you can measure with a compass. It's something intangible. It's something that will communicate with in a different way than you're used to. And that is going to take a bit of getting used to. And you kind of just have to keep, as I said, keep an open mind and accept that things may not happen in such a concrete way. You may have roundabout communications or experiences that you might start to question yourself. You might start to think, is this actually happening or am I actually crazy? And I think that's all part of the process, and learning to trust that and look at that with a bit more suspension of disbelief, for lack of a better word, is how you kind of navigate that transition.
yeah, and I think, like I said, I'll just finish this by saying that this. I would like to bring up Julia's father for a minute because I think he's a perfect example of an atheist who is an atheist because he has no other frame of reference. I remember I had a conversation with her father, and he said, "I don't believe in Satan because I've had no experience to prove to me they exist. I have no frame of reference, kind of thing." Well, if Satan hasn't revealed himself to someone, then you can't expect them to believe in him, can you? So the reason I bring him up though is because he's not a nasty person. He's not. He doesn't not believe in Satan because he's just determined not to believe in Satan. He doesn't believe in Satan because he has no evidence that proves he exists. But he's not hostile towards religious people, and that's the people that I have issues with. Are the people that have a hostile attitude towards religious people because hey man, just because you haven't experienced something doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And contrary to what you think, you're not the be all and end all of human existence. So maybe the demons just didn't find you that interesting. I'm sorry for you. I know you find yourself interesting, but they might not. Anyway, moving on.
Okay. So I think the final question we have on here, I'll just quickly look through the chat and make sure that we haven't picked up any others, but we have a question from Marie that says, what are your thoughts on Ahriman? Do you believe he's Satan, and what's the perspective on that?
Well, I personally do. I mean, some people believe that he can't be Satan because he's such an evil spirit. He's a father of evil, and some people believe that he's so evil that he has no redeeming qualities and stuff like that. And some people believe that even associating him with Satan is ridiculous because he's pre-Christian in every way. But But I think Satan has been around, and he's been here since the beginning. So, and I associate Ahriman with Satan. And one of the things I will say is that we do still call Satan the Lord of Darkness. He is both darkness and light in our tradition, and we don't look away from the darker or evil aspects of life. We just learn to accept it. It's part of human nature. One of the things about shadow path diabolism is we don't try to deny the animal desires that we have, whatever those may be, whether it's gluttony or lust or whatever. We try to embrace them and accept them and learn to um, to live with them and not try to deny them. So we also don't deny our darkness or our anger or anything else like that. And I think Satan has both darkness and light within him. And if you offend him and if you upset him, then you'll get his wrath. If you do things that are beneficial to his cause, then you'll get his blessings. And he's just like everyone else. He has a personality, and so to say that he's either one thing or the other and that he could not be Ahriman is ridiculous, you know. But I guess that answers it sort of. I don't know if that's the best answer, but that's the answer I came up with off the top of my head.
Absolutely. And I have the handicap of inexperience here. I'm still learning about the different names, the different facets. But I think that sums up what little I know very well.
I hope that answers the question, Marie. I hope it was satisfactory, and I made you look good, and you helped me look good. But I don't know. By the way, that's Marie Ravensoul. She's one of the members of the ministry, and you know her from her books and stuff. And if you want books on Satanism, I definitely recommend you check out her books. And At Satan's Altar is her first book, and it's the one that she's most known for, and it's probably the one that will help you if you're an absolute beginner. And I highly recommend them because Marie is very genuine in her dedication to Satan, and we appreciate the help that she's been for the ministry, and we appreciate that she's here supporting us now. She's a lovely lady. You should get to talk to her, and if you're fortunate enough to get to talk to her, you'll find out what a cool person she is. Anyway, thanks, Marie.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Brie. And thank you very much to everyone who's been participating in the chat. It's really important for us to get engagement with these podcasts. Like, we don't just want to be talking at you. And one of the benefits of doing it live is that you are actually able to interact with us and talk back to us. And so to all of you, thank you so much, and satanic blessings to all of you. And thank you so much for participating.
Was that the final question?
It is the final question. Yes, we have reached the end of the list.
Okay. Well, I just want to remind everybody that we will be here 2 weeks from today at the same time at 4:30 p.m. Central, and we'll be doing the same basic "What is Shadow Path Diabolism" presentation. So the beginning of it will be exactly the same. We'll answer the same basic questions, but we will have a question and answer session at the end. So if you think of something that you want to ask and you want to be able to get an immediate response, please feel free to come back and ask your question then. All questions are welcome. All we ask of you is that you be respectful and ask serious questions, and we'll try to give you serious answers. If you ask us questions that are clearly meant to be nasty, then we just won't respond to them. Okay? And I thank you for being here, and please join us next time. Thanks, guys.
Absolutely.
Bye-bye
Thank you, everyone, so much. Bye now.